Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Um, I would like to do a video for you guys today. If you guys have seen me before doing this sort of video before, you will know that I was for a little while on a project where I would be just talking about Islam through the contents of the Quran, particularly looking at some of the Islamic stories that exemplify um, the prophets as the best examples of what it really means to be a Muslim or a servant of God. So I wanted to continue today with that project, and I wanted to basically do another video for you guys today in case you were following along, and if you were not and this is your first time, well, welcome. I will do my best to continue this project because it's really important to me, and I really want to contribute to the positive narrative of showing the best parts of what it really means to be Muslim, particularly from the point of view from the Quran. So inshallah, if you are interested in this sort of thing, by all means, please watch the video. It's going to be about half an hour. I will do part 1 and part 2, and unfortunately they have to be a little bit longer than 5 or 10 minutes because they're story based, and of course in that format it does takes time to really talk about these things. My interest is particularly is to convey a very positive image of Islam through the stories that I'm telling you, and also to hopefully shed some light on some important principles or ideas or spiritual concepts that that are important for someone who for whom God is plays a central role in their life. And so if you believe in God, even if you're not Muslim, if you believe in God, and or you're starting to think about God in a way where you're looking for answers, or you like to hear a little bit more about Islam through the Quran, then this is a great opportunity to just to get some additional information about that. And I hope that you will enjoy the video. Today's video is about Noah and essentially the beginning of his story. And in fact, his story was actually one of the first stories actually told in the Quran. And so it's a very, very interesting story. And I wanted to make a very important point at the very end of the story, inshallah, hopefully that you remain throughout the video, and I can share that with you. So without further ado, this story begins like this. So at one point in the Quran, God says he decided to create man, and he said this to the angels. He said to them, I am placing a successor or a vicegerent on earth. They said, well, will you place in it someone who will cause corruption and shed blood, while we declare your praises and sanctify you? And of course he said, I know what you do not know. Now, it's interesting, this conversation, because, God says, yeah, hey, I'm about to create this creature. And of course, the angels say, well, hey, like, yo, like, like we've been praising you from times. Like, shouldn't we get that position to be the creature that represents you on earth? And he says, well, I know what you don't know. And the Quran continues and it says, and we taught Adam the names, all of them. Then he presented the angels and said, then he presented them being the names, to the angels and said, well, tell me the names of these if you are truthful. Now, the word them in the phrase, he presented them, meaning them being the names, is an Arabic word supposedly that has a pronoun that is used to refer to rational beings having life, sense, or understanding. And this is something that comes from a really well-known Islamic commentary. And what this commentary says is that because this pronoun is referring to rational beings, it actually refers to the Prophet Muhammad and his family. Now, this actually commentary comes from Al-Mizan, which is a very well-known Islamic, Quranic commentary that deals with, what the verse means, what words means, etc., and gives a sort of translation or a commentary of what's actually happening here in the verses. But what's interesting though is that this work, or the author of this work, who is actually, his name is Tabatabai, and of course he wrote like maybe about 28. He has like this Al-Mizan is about 28 volume piece of work. And anyways, he says that this is really in reference to the Prophet Muhammad and his family, these names. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't give any examples in his commentary from a hadith or anything like that. He just says, because this pronoun refers to rational beings. And I don't want to burden you too much with a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff I will talk about maybe in other videos in terms of how Islamic orthodoxy, particularly Shia orthodoxy, gives justification or lack thereof, or certainly their perspective on these things. But I thought that that's an interesting thing to mention. However, in Shia Islam, which is the point of view from which I derive a lot of which is who I am. I'm a Shia Muslim, and a lot of my point of view comes from that particular tradition. And in that tradition, what is known as an imam, or one of the imams who are known as the successors of the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, there's about 12 imams. I will also get into that a little bit more, but in perhaps another video. But essentially, in the Shia tradition, the imams are known as infallible successors after the Prophet in terms of their knowledge and in terms of their behavior, and that their word is equal to that of the Prophet Muhammad's word. And we have a tradition from Imam Jafar Sadiq in which he talks about the names, and of course it doesn't reconcile with what Al-Mizan and that commentary, that Quranic commentary talks about. And what he says basically in this hadith is that the names are the names of everything, right? And he talks about, he says earth, mountain, etc., etc. And so essentially, basically, it's the names of everything. And of course, it's not just the names of the earth and the things on it, because the angels certainly knew that. So what he was really trying to say in this hadith is the names of things, whatever they may be, whatever you find on earth or heaven or beyond. And so when God said to the angels, well, tell me the names of these things if you are truthful, the angels, they said, well, glory be to you. We have no knowledge except for what you have taught us. It is you who are the knowledgeable and the wise. And he turned to Adam and he said to Adam, O Adam, tell them their names. And when he told them their names, he said, did I not tell you that I know the secrets of the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you reveal and what you conceal? So he turned to the angel. He says, well, tell me the names of these things if you are truthful. Essentially, if you are worthy of this position, or this position of vicegerency, this position of representative on earth. And they said, well, we don't really have knowledge except for what you teach us. And of course he says to Adam, well, Adam, you tell them what these things are. And of course Adam taught them. And he said, well, did I not tell you that I know the secrets of the heavens and the earth? I know what you reveal and what you conceal. In other words, did I not tell you that I know what you essentially are capable of and what you are not capable of? What your limits are and what your limits are not, so to speak. And in this case, obviously, the angels, their limit was they couldn't convey at this level of knowledge the things that, or they couldn't receive at this level of knowledge the thing that Adam had received, for whatever the reasons are, right? Then God turned to the angels and he said, okay, after he demonstrated the position of Adam, or the capacity of this creature Adam, he said to the angels, he said, "Oh angels, bow down before Adam." So they bowed down except for Shaitan. He was not of those who bowed down. Now, there's a little bit of a backstory here, because you're probably wondering, well, if God is saying to the angels bow down to Adam, how does Shaitan come in, or Satan comes into the picture here? Now, for those of you who are, excuse me for 1 second, I just want to, sorry, I just had to check something here. You're probably wondering, well, how does Satan or the devil or Shaitan comes into the picture here? Well, because there is a little bit of a backstory. And I won't get too much into it. There's levels to it, but I'm just going to give you just enough to sum up, give you an idea of where, how this all happened. So God has made it very clear in the Quran that he has created other beings, and apart from angels and human beings, that he did also create the jinns, or the jinn race. And of course the jinns are made from smokeless fire, and we can't see them with the naked eye, but they can see us. And it is said that the jinns did inhabit the earth, and so the story goes, at some point Shaitan, or the devil, or Satan, was on earth, and there is a bit of a backstory on him and how he managed to get into heaven, but essentially he used to be and was up until this point one of God's righteous and obedient servant. And his story led him to the point where God took him and brought him up to heaven. And there's a story about all that, which I don't want to really go into. Maybe another time when I do a piece specifically on him, I will talk a little bit about that. But he finds himself in heaven. He's a good servant of God. And believe it or not, he actually wanted the position of vicegerency on earth. And there's some backstory of how that sort of plays out as well. But at this point, God has already chosen his vicegerent, and now he has assembled all the angels and Satan, or in fact his name is known as Iblis. And I will actually go back and forth using Iblis or Shaitan as a reference for him. And at this point, he is part of the assembly of angels in which God now commands to bow down before Adam. This is essentially what's happening here. So God says, well, I commanded the angels to bow down, but they didn't bow down. So they all bowed down, except Iblis. And so God said to him when this happened, he says, well, what prevented you from bowing down when I commanded you? He said, well, I am better than he. You created me from fire and you created him from mud. So, he says, well, when God asked him, well, what kept you from bowing down when I commanded you to bow down? He says, well, why are you essentially asking me to bow down to this creature? Well, I'm better than him. You've made him from mud or from clay, and I'm made from fire. I'm obviously better than him. Now, Islamic folklore talks about this. This is the first time in the history of, of the heavenly planes where you have this creature who commits the act of prejudice. Is the first act of prejudice, right? And it's in his language. He says that, well, I'm better. And his argument rests on the fact that, how he's created in terms of, he saw the exterior of man and he says, well, I'm better than that, right? He's made from mud and I'm from clay. And this is the same sort of prejudice that people tend to have in their logic when they talk about, well, I'm of this color and maybe you're not light enough or you're not dark enough or whatever, it's the same type of logic or the same type of approach. And so God says, well, this is not appropriate for you to behave in this fashion. Get down from here, right? It is not for you to act arrogantly. And so God termed that action of his arrogance, right? And in fact, the word that's used in Arabic for this type of arrogance is tatakabara, right? Tatakabara. And it means to assume greatness for oneself. Okay, this is what it means, to assume greatness for oneself. And this is typically the position people who think that they're better than people, who are very prejudicial or judgmental, they always take this air of superiority. And this is the type of arrogance that the Quran highlights here at this point. So in any event, so God says, well, get down from here. It is not fitting for you to act arrogantly in it, right? Or in this place. You are of the lowly, right? The al-sagirin, right? So lowly, the abased, the degraded, humiliated, dishonored, essentially, right? So essentially, he's now stripped of his honor. And he turns to God and he says, well, give me respite until the day they are resurrected. And God says, yeah, you are of those given respite. Now, once again, when I do a piece essentially on the devil, I will get a little bit more detail as to some of these, how these discussions sort of came about, because as you read in the story, you wonder why it is that God just kind of gives him this this request of his. And in fact, there is a discussion with him where he talks about, there's a hadith to talk about this here, you know, how he had been a a great servant of God for so many years. So he turns to God and he says, well, is there no justice from you? You know, that I was such a good servant of yours for so long. Is there nothing I can request of you? And of course, God gave him, and God essentially said, okay, go ahead, ask for whatever you want. And this is one of the things he asked for. But that's an aside. That's more in the traditions. And when I do a video specifically on him, I'll talk more about that. So God gives him respite. So interesting here is that he turns to God and he says, well, you know, give me respite till the day that they are raised. And once he gets that confirmation or request from God, he says to God, he says, well, you know, because you have caused me to err, I will surely lie in wait for them on your path. What's interesting here is in waiting, right, or lie in wait for them on your path. It's there's an Arabic term that is the term waiting here in this response of his. There's an Arabic term that is la'ak udana, right? La'ak udana, and of course this word means waiting in Arabic, but it actually comes from another Arabic word that's qu'ud. Now, qu'ud means to literally sit, okay? So essentially what he's saying to God, when he says, I will surely lie in wait, right, for them on your path. And essentially what he's saying is, I will literally stay on this path of yours, and I will sit and wait for those of your creatures, and I will wait in ambush in order to mislead those who travel on the path. This is exactly what he says to God. And he continues and he says, then I will come at them from before them and from behind them and from their right and from their left, and you will not find most of them grateful. So after he gets his request to be given respite until the day we are raised, meaning, of course, the day of judgment, he says this to God. And it's interesting because in other parts of the Quran, there's another verse that's very similar to this last verse. Okay? And it goes like this. It says, O my Lord, because thou hast put me in the wrong, I will make wrong fair seeming to them on the earth, and I will put them all in the wrong, except thy servants among them who are sincere. So this verse reads much like the previous verse that I just recently read. And essentially he's saying the same thing. Look, because you've put me in a position where you've caused me to err, okay, that I will take revenge on you, on this creature of yours, and I will do so by misguiding them. And he describes how he intends to do that. And in both verses, the description is very much the same, with the exception of two things. In the first verse I read, he says, you will not find most of them grateful, okay? That I will mislead most of them except for those who are grateful. And in the second verse that I read you, he says that I will do this exact same thing, and you will not find most of them turning to your path except those who are sincere. And of course, the Arabic word used for sincerity is mukhlasina. Now, I mentioned these verses back to back, although they come from separate parts of the different chapters within the Quran. What's interesting about these verses is that God is saying, look, through the voice of Iblis, is that, yeah, this creature who has now become fallen off the way, is bent on seeking revenge and essentially being the enemy of God and the enemy of man. He says that there's two things that he will never be able to do on this path. And the first of which, he says, I will never be able, in spite of being able to misguide and mislead them or approach them from their front, from behind, from their left side, essentially in an all-encompassing manner. He said, but the only thing that I will not be able to do is to misguide them or those who are grateful. Okay, so that's one thing he says, that he cannot misguide those who are grateful. And the second thing he says, that I will definitely be able to mislead anyone except for those persons who are sincere. Now, Shia tradition says that Mukhlasina refers to the prophets, of course, beginning with Adam right down to the last prophet Muhammad, and of course his infallible household, the 12 imams, and of course along with them includes his daughter as well, Fatima alayhi salam. So this is the position of Shia Islam with respect to that verse. However, while some people may believe that, that's fine. It's okay to believe, that's not a problem. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't at least admit that even if it does refer to them, what's more important here, and that this verse is really saying, is that that the attitude of gratitude and the attitude of sincerity are the two most important things for which prevents and protect us from the handiwork of Shaitan. And I think we need to keep that in mind, because sincerity and gratitude are not the pejorative or the exclusive human quality of just the prophets. It's actually a human quality of all human beings, and that's very important to note. So in the interest of not making this video too long, I actually wanted to keep it no more than half an hour. So what I will do is I will leave it here. So this is part 1 of the video, and I will continue with the part 2, the story, in another video. So hopefully you stay tuned and join me in the next segment. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.